In past videos, we've had some fun looking at the trains housed in Duluth, Minnesota's St. Louis County Depot. Today we're going to delve into the history of the depot and profile the Northern Lights Express, a future intercity rail service currently in planning. Duluth marks the end of the North American shipping route across the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Seaway. The city grew up around iron ore mining and manufacturing industries, so it's no surprise that railroads spread out from the port city over the latter half of the 19th century. The city's placement on the lakes afforded modest metropolitan development, metered only by harsh winter conditions blowing in off the lake. A community grew up around the jobs afforded by the multitude of resources passing across the country for export via freighter ships. The Zenith City's first train station was a wooden structure built on the site of the present depot. The second depot, carved out of local granite, sandstone, and yellow brick, opened in 1892. Locally, there were 4 different railroads bearing Duluth in their names that operated from the depot, as well as the Great Northern and Northern Pacific Railways, to name a couple. The depot is located on the west end of Duluth's downtown core and along the harbor, marking the beginning of Lake Superior, the largest freshwater lake by surface area in the world. Turning into the Amtrak era, it was in 1975 that the route of the Arrowhead train service from Minneapolis would reach Superior, Wisconsin across the bay, and 2 years later that train was extended to serve the depot in Duluth for 1 year, prior to the rollout of the North Star train service in 1978. Amtrak's Arrowhead initially offered a connection to Chicago in Minneapolis via the North Coast Hiawatha, but later schedule changes would break this connection northbound in the preceding years. The North Star was an attempt to market Duluth to travelers in Chicago with a new North Country-bound sleeper train. This was the tail end of an era when 3 named trains took the route from St. Paul to Chicago, a far cry from today's single offering of the Empire Builder. As austerity of the 80s kicked in, the state of Minnesota struggled to justify funding for operating the North Star, and the train saw its final run on April 7, 1985. Throughout this time, the depot had achieved status on the National Register of Historic Places, and came under nonprofit status as a civic gathering space for the community to enjoy. Over the preceding decades, the depot became host to the Minnesota Ballet, Duluth Playhouse, St. Louis County Historical Society Museum, the Duluth Art Institute, and Lake Superior Railroad Museum. I can recall visiting the depot in the 90s, and its collections have grown and matured, as has its community in that time span. The Great Hall has a character strikingly reminiscent of Denver's Union Station. The twin fireplaces and open balcony widen the scope of journeys to come for passengers embarking from the depot. A wide variety of characters and characteristics of the region are laid out among the historic galleries. These museums have refined their collections over the years, which are all closely presented and well designed. The depot's design has the Great Hall sitting atop and up the hillside block from the train platforms, which are situated along the view of the harbor beyond and below the railroad grade. The train museum occupies the former passenger rail platforms under an extension of the building's canopy over the historic platform awnings and across from Interstate 35. The North Shore Scenic Railroad occupies a lower street-level corner of the depot, where tickets for shoreline excursions and dinner trains can be purchased, along with Foamer gifts and tourism brochures galore. There's also a patio to gather passengers bound for any of the regular excursions offered throughout the year. Not many communities get to enjoy this level of mostly free and otherwise appropriately priced cultural and historic entertainment. Way to go, Duluth! As for the future, there's the proposed Northern Lights Express train service concept. This service has been a pet project of various legislators and lobbies, none of which have generated enough capital to expedite the rollout of the new train service. BNSF operates the line between Minneapolis and Duluth, currently as a freight operation, which has some significant sections of 50-mile-per-hour track speed restrictions. Though recently there have been some successes in earmarking funds for improvements on the route, the progress as is would be considered stagnant. The most recent development for the Northern Lights Express was the move away from Talgo train sets, as utilized on Amtrak's Cascade service, to Siemens Charger-led train sets. Amtrak has included the route on their wishful thinking map, but the actual advancement towards reality for the train is minimal. An 80-20 federal and state funding agreement seems to be the likely operating expenditure, but the progress of upgrading infrastructure on the line is yet modest. The city of Duluth would again be a more wealthy port of call with an efficient, frequent train service to match intercity bus service on the competing Jefferson Line's bus routes. The outstate nature of the project has diluted much of its immediacy among politicians in Minnesota. For most communities along the line, which bypasses the I-35 corridor for the more central route into Minneapolis, their destinations lie within an hour's drive to either of the train's endpoints. The freight line out of Minneapolis has more than 60 trains daily, according to Wikipedia, making the need to work with BNSF on schedule slots for the new train service crucial. The fact that the train is still as conceptual as ever while the railroad itself remains only as advanced in its infrastructure as it needs to be to sustain profitable operations amidst the climate of outstate demand for its hauling services gives me the feeling that the depot in Duluth is not going to be hosting regular passenger trains to the Twin Cities for a number of years. Anyways, there's still more to come from Duluth in the way of railroads, both on the channel and in reality. Until the next train, keep changing your horizons. Bye now.